I never really thought that proving that he doped was something that worthwhile, because I thought, you're never going to get like the true inside story. It's always going to be circumstantial evidence, and he can always deny it, and he has his army of followers, and so why even bother? So we focused on the business of Lance Armstrong, right? I wrote a story about how he actually tried to, along with some of his wealthy businessmen who backed his team, he tried to buy the Tour de France. And eventually we did it. We broke the story with Vanessa O'Connell, who was my co-author on that book. We broke the story, and that was the beginning of the end for Armstrong.
Are you human?
Is that a motorcycle helmet in the background? Are you
Yes, but I'm a passenger.
Oh, you're the passenger. Okay.
Yeah, and I can see your book there in the background.
Oh yeah, I have to promote that.
That's what we are going to talk about.
Okay.
Finally, we managed to meet.
I know. I'm so sorry about that the other day. My internet after that, my internet was going out like once a week.
Really?
Yeah, they kept screwing up. I went outside. I heard them. They were working on it out in the street, and I heard the guys saying, "Oh, this is a shit show." Like something was wrong. I don't know. I have a Starlink satellite over there sitting in every couple days. I'd have to go out and put the Starlink out there to like get internet. Crazy.
Okay. Why don't you use it all the time?
It's still better to have cable, I mean, I guess you could, but it's more expensive and slower than cable internet. It's like $150 a month,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Fair enough. So I hope they gave you at least a discount or some kind of extra.
Yes,
service.
they gave me $5, a discount of $5. Doesn't quite make up for the $150.
Not really. So you on the lookout for different provider, huh?
I mean, it's a monopoly. There's only one where I live. It's terrible.
Oh yeah. You can always move to Europe. It's much better with internet.
A little better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love that actually. Yeah. If you can get me an EU passport, that'd be great.
Like Brits after Brexit, suddenly they found their grandparents living in Ireland, right?
Right, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to go to Italy. I have an Italian last name, so I'll go to Italy and find.
Exactly. That's what that was actually. And see, allora parli italiano o no?
No. I'm not really Italian, but they came from Italy like so long ago.
Okay.
So,
but you can do 23andMe, and then you can just claim that you are close relative.
If that's what I have to do to get a passport, I'll learn Italian. It's fine. Okay. I'll do it.
There are some other ways. Like, I guess you are married, right? So that
I'm married to an Australian. So.
I guess you don't know how I found you. It wasn't about the book, but I started reading about what kind of work you are doing, and it's on my list. I haven't read it. I'll be honest, but it sounds amazing from the reviews and everything. But we will talk about it. How I found you. I signed up to Neuron, this newsletter about AI and new tech.
Yeah.
And then there was some interview about like you did with the guys. And then I started reading a little bit of your newsletter as well. That's why I saw that one landed earlier today, so I have to still read it. Then I checked your book. Why did you choose this subject, and why Louis Armstrong?
Yeah, I mean,
Lance.
Yeah, Louis Armstrong is great too.
He's the other guy.
He didn't cheat, as far as I know. So I was at the Wall Street Journal. I basically started my career at the Wall Street Journal, and then we started a sports page there, and I was sort of, roped into covering sports. It wasn't like I had set out to be a sports reporter, but it was like, hey, this is a good opportunity to kind of like move up and, become a real reporter at the Journal. I was a news assistant at the time, and it really didn't start out as a story about Lance Armstrong. We were looking into, just corruption, I guess, in the Olympic, as you probably know, there's like a lot of corruption in the IOC, and it goes back many, many years. And so there was this, UCI, which is the cycling governing body within the Olympics, had all these issues. And I did a bunch of reporting on it. It was Lance Armstrong was actually retired at the time that I was doing this reporting. And everybody sort of knew that he had doped. It was kind of a shock to me that in the US, I think his reputation was like so great. And people were talking about him, running for governor of Texas and becoming a president one day and all this stuff. And I realized that like, actually we had just totally, like, the American press had totally ignored this story. And which in Europe, I think it was different. I think it was much bigger. Yeah. People were much more skeptical of him. And so I kind of thought, well, it's been covered. The guy's basically, I mean, the information is out there, right? It's just a question of whether you choose to believe it or not, to look at the truth, right? Like take the green pill or the red pill or whatever. Yeah. Since he was retired, it wasn't, I thought, well, there's not much of a story here. And then he decided to come out of retirement. And so I had all this reporting in my notebook about him. And so we just started writing about him. And I never really thought that proving that he doped was something that worthwhile, because what are you going to do? Like, you're never going to get you're never going to get like the true inside story. It's always going to be circumstantial evidence, and he can always deny it. And he has his army of followers. And so why even bother? So we focused on the business of Lance Armstrong. I wrote a story about how he actually tried to, along with some of his wealthy businessmen who backed his team, he tried to buy the Tour de France and turn it into this league. And of course, like the subtext of all this is there's always a doping subtext, right? Like I think they felt like, well, we should make cycling a pro sport, like, kind of like the NFL or Major League Baseball in the US, where drug testing is not as strict. Like you can pretty much do whatever you want in these sports. And if you know the right protocols, that, you can get away with it. Yeah. And I think, and if you get caught, I think a lot of times, it just gets sort of brushed under the rug. And that's what they wanted to do. And I just thought all this stuff was fascinating. But then, one day, one of my sources said, Floyd Landis, who was Lance Armstrong's lieutenant in the Tour, who I had talked to before, has gone totally crazy. He's gone off the deep end, and he's writing these emails accusing Armstrong of doping, but like to a small group of people. And that was the moment I was like, oh my God, this is like I never thought any of this would ever happen. But of course, then I had to try to find the emails, and then, Landis wasn't talking to anyone. And, I had to then try to confirm that the emails were actually real and legitimate. So it was this whole probably month of reporting to try to uncover this. And eventually we did it. We broke the story with Vanessa O'Connell, who was my co-author on that book. We broke the story, and it was like, that was the beginning of the end for Armstrong. It was this huge turning point. And then there was this federal criminal investigation into the team, and it sort of shook a bunch of things loose. It
started because of the book, of what you discovered?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was sort of, the investigation was kind of into cycling, into, doping and cycling. And then I think after we broke that story, I think it really kind of shifted focus and became about Armstrong. It was actually focused on another team, lower level team called Rock Racing. Before that, there were a lot of crazy characters in that book, which is
the best stories. How did you make them speak? How did you get to the source, and how did you make them agree to
No, it's that's the question of journalism, right? It's how do you get people to talk to you? You don't have subpoena power like law enforcement officials. But I think that, first of all, there were whistleblowers in that case. There were people who really wanted the story to come out. Betsy Andreu, who was the wife of one of Lance's former teammates. People like that were really, willing to talk. Of course, they didn't have all the information. So you do have to get people on the inner circle to talk. And, Floyd eventually, I think he wanted to get this off of his shoulders. He felt the weight of all of these lies, kind of bringing him down. And I spent a lot of time like going around and meeting with him just off the record, just talking with him before he eventually decided to do, to go on the record and tell his story. And it was interesting because like, I remember sitting with him, like I met him at his cabin in Idlewild, California, which is out in the woods. And, we're sitting on his deck and he just is like, you could tell he was just like he was this weight. You could almost see the weight coming off of his shoulders,
Right.
he just, and then the story just starts coming out, and he's talking and it's just like, and we had like, basically it was almost like a 3-day long conversation where we would talk all day and, a mix of like talking and telling the story. And then also just sort of like getting to know each other. And, the tape recorder's running and then it stopped and then, and then we'd go meet at a new location. And, what he didn't tell me was at the time he was actually wearing, in that investigation into rock racing, he was actually wearing a wire. Like he had been like meeting with these guys wearing like an FBI wire, to try to catch this like drug ring, and then I think a lot of other people in that sport also wanted to talk, like they didn't all go on the record, but they felt this was sort of time to tell the story. And I think also to kind of like, if the story is going to come out, then maybe they should just have their, make sure that their part of it is true. Right. And that they get their 2 cents in. And then there's also a bunch of ancillary characters, right? It's not just like you can get information from, secondhand sources and then eventually use that to get the firsthand sources to tell you things. And it's that sort of thing. But I remember one of the anecdotes in the story, they would have these training camps in Austin, Texas. And the point of this training camp in Austin was really not to train. It was kind of like to, get the teammate, like figure out who should be on the inner circle, of this team. Right. And so they would start off, they'd go for a bike ride with some sponsors, and then they would go to like a party, and then they'd go to like another party. And then as the night went on, they would go, then they went to a strip club called the Yellow Rose. And then they went back to Stapleton, his agent's office, Bill Stapleton's office. And they had this other party where there were like prostitutes and like cocaine and stuff like that. Yeah. And like the people who ended up at that party, I think that it was sort of like they could be trusted, to keep the secret. And so it was sort of like this test. And so I thought it was an important anecdote to, to get into the story. And I was at the Wall Street Journal at the time, and we're trying to get this story into the Wall Street Journal. And they're like, I remember sitting in the office, with Jerry Baker, who was the managing editor of the Journal at the time. And he was like, this seems like tabloid, you're talking about like cocaine and hooker. And he was like worried that it was like going to make the Journal look tabloidy. And of course, like Rupert Murdoch had just bought the paper, and people might say it's like Murdoch's making the paper tabloidy. So we had to make this argument that it was an important part of the story because it wasn't just frivolous. It had a lot to do with like the psychology of the whole thing. But the bar was so high to get that published. How many people actually saw this? And, can we trust Floyd Landis? He had already lied about his own doping at one point. And I remember just calling anybody I could possibly think of who might have been at that party. And then finally, I just found this one guy who was like a kid at the time, a junior bike racer. And he ended up at this party, and he ended up quitting cycling. He wasn't a pro racer anymore. Confirmed it all. It was like, yeah, I was there. And it was like, he just didn't think much about it. And then I remember him calling me later and saying like, oh, I want to take it back. Like, I'm just like, sorry, like the information's out, like this is going in. But it was like that kind of stuff. Just sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your question. But
no. It's great. And actually, and that's what I read. Like the Atlantic said that your anecdotes and all the information you collected, they said a chilling tale, and they sound like they were actually crafted in a TV drama writer's room, because it is. It sounds like, the even the what was the movie based on the Theranos, right? Or even House of Cards kind of thing, kind of like it reminds me of the. In the end, it's based all on human interactions, trust and mistrust, and I guess maybe those meetings in those very controversial places could be a hook for them to use against those people, right? I don't know how they got to maybe record something, but that's how actually sometimes what happens in politics, right? Then they like opposition finds out, or like the ruling party finds out that they were recorded.
Yeah, for sure. And I do agree. I think it was like Theranos, but like with like professional athletes and and celebrities and Sheryl Crow, and it's just so and like all over the world. It was so much fun to cover.
I'm jealous. Like you got to live through this and speak with all those people. Like it's an amazing story, and you did a great job, right? Because you were recognized. Is it a bestseller in New York Times?
Yeah, New York Times. Yeah, it was a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
So is there any other book in the making?
I don't know. Maybe there's a book on AI to be done. That's what I've been writing about lately. I think there's actually some similarities in the sense that it's a very wide group of just fascinating people, with, I don't know if there's some deep, dark secret, that everybody's trying to protect, but I think that part's different. I mean, it would be great if I could find something like that, because that always creates a great story. But there is tension, right? There is tension around, what is the direction that this technology should go in?
Exactly.
And is it a threat to humanity and all of this stuff? I think, some of that I think is a bit, some of it may be kind of silly, and, I don't really believe that, but it does create some human drama, and I think any great story ultimately is about people, not artificial people, but real people.
Real people. Yeah. And it is a problem. It can be a problem because AI is such a powerful technology, right? That if it ends up in the hands of a few, then it can become a problem, because they direct how we think, what we read, how we feel. Like it's unthinkable.
Yeah. I don't think that will happen. I mean, I think this is actually, I think that the direction that I think it's going is probably more open source, and these models themselves are probably kind of commoditized. I think we're going to see a lot of disruption before we see concentration of power. I mean, these waves of technology, it's almost impossible if you really think about it. It's almost impossible for incumbents to somehow hold on to their seat as incumbents into the next wave of technology, because it's just so, it's when truly disruptive technology comes along, big companies are just too slow to, to be able to capitalize. And then it's, before they know it, it's too late. And I know a lot of these big companies even developed the technology, helped develop it, but I think there's way more to come I think we're only at the very beginning of this AI revolution. And, I think people's eyes are not on the ball. Like yesterday, it was the announcement of Sora, the OpenAI text to video model. And it's really stunning. I mean, you look at the videos and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is so real. And it's amazing. And I'm impressive that they've been able to accomplish it. At the same time, it's kind of the shiny object, right? Like that is an evolutionary product that comes from, that is, it is great, but it's not a revolutionary product. And I think on the same day, Meta released their VJEPA model, or framework for training AI models, and open sourced it, right? And I think, and that got very little attention, right? Because it wasn't very. But I read that and I thought, this is actually, I don't know if this it's in itself, this paper will be some breakthrough, but I think it probably will have more impact, or it could potentially have more impact than something like Sora, because Sora is a product that they're putting out in the market. This is like a new avenue toward even more intelligent AI. And, and I think that's what we need. I don't think large language models are just going to get bigger and more powerful, and eventually that's the end. I think there are other directions that the technology needs to go first. Yeah. I'm not an AI researcher, but I mean, this is sort of like, I think you can sort of talk to AI researchers and get a sense of like the big picture. And that's kind of like my takeaway.
But you must admit that, tools like Sora will, or are already redefining how we think of creativity, and all the graphic designers, all the like movie directors. I don't know if they will be on par, but like people like us who don't know how to create videos, if we have access to such tools, and we can maybe create like a starting point of some creative project.
It's funny because people are worried about this as far as like disrupting Hollywood. I actually think, people are worried about actors being put out of business.
Yeah.
I think actually studios should be worried. Like, I think studios have somehow been able to take the digital revolution in like digital film and all this stuff, and somehow like keep the power, right? And the budgets of these films just get bigger and bigger. And I remember when the digital film I'm old enough, I guess, where like I remember when it was like, oh, imagine when movies are filmed on digital film. Film is so expensive and it's hard to edit, but if you did it on digital film, it could democratize it, and then anybody could make a feature film. And like, of course that didn't happen, right? Like you have some independent films and there's Clerks, but then look at Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was a low budget film.
Yes.
That won Best Picture. So if anybody should be worried, it's the studios. Cause I think like democratizing, I think we're not there yet, but democratizing special effects is like, that's a studio issue, because storytelling, like that is actually what makes these things valuable, right? Like really great stories. I mean, I don't know if you like theater, but I mean, you can go to the theater, right? And off Broadway where they don't have any set practically. And it could just be 5 people on a stage, and you can be like riveted, right? Because your imagination does the work. So I think storytelling is just like that's a human endeavor. I don't think AI is going to replace storytelling. I think people are going to do that. And all this AI stuff is just that's the set, that's the dressing around the story. So I actually see it as a positive, I guess, in the long run for human creativity.
Yeah. I think we will see more indie, like more individual projects, right? And I guess it will spark further creativity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like art, drawing, and all this stuff. I mean, like there are probably great photographers today who just could not have been photographers in like the 1980s, like they just would have never made it because they didn't have the resources, and now like anybody can just go, if they can dream it up, and, they can probably afford to get the equipment necessary to do it. I don't know. I think that's a really good thing. Like I'm particularly not great at like drawing things, but I have like ideas. I have like, like I can now draw things with the AI and and make my ideas come to life.
Show it
like,
somebody.
Why isn't that
like,
a good
this
thing?
This is what I meant.
Yeah. And I get that. Like than people who are like good at that sort of like physical act of putting pen to paper and like translating 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions. And that's like an amazing skill. But I mean, in the end, like if we can have machines do that part, you know, like I think it just frees up people with other skills to try that. And that's like the story of humanity. I remember in high school taking a technical drawing class. I don't know why I did, but like somehow I ended up taking this class. And I remember like the first half of the class was like everything done by hand. And I was like terrible at it. I'm like, how am I getting like a bad grade in like technical drawing? Like, this is ridiculous. And then like we switched over to computers for the second half of the class and we used like CAD. And then I got an A and it was fine. Like, because I didn't have to worry about drawing the straight line with my hand and all this stuff, because computers could do that part and I could just worry about whatever the math or, you know, whatever the other. So I think, you know, that's, you know, I guess I see it as a, like, I don't know, who's to say
enabler,
who's to say what's fair or not fair, or like, you know, I think it's just the way new tools are created, and that benefits like different people with different types of creativity and brain power.
Yeah, exactly. And if there is such a huge demand, it means that, you know, it's needed. Like people really want to expand on creativity, on the creative part of the thinking. Okay, let's go back to the scandals, since you like to cover that part. And I hosted like to few episodes back, Professor Guido Palazzo, professor of design. He's a professor of business ethics. And he covers corporate scandals and mafia. He's Italian, so that also helps. And he says that ethics is a muscle and you need to train it to remain strong. And obviously humans can be both evil and like they are capable of great and evil things. And it's easy to cross the line. And since like right now, what we are seeing with the more and more powerful tools and technology tools, do you think there will be always balance between those forces? I mean, like, we've seen some scandals in tech before. It wasn't only what was that, Cambridge Analytica and Theranos and WeWork and all the larger and smaller scandals. But what do you think will, like, how can we, maybe different question, how can we make sure that we are protected from the evil actors? Because it's so much easier right now to fake things.
Theranos and all these scandals, the mafia in Italy, these are not failures of humanity, right? There's always going to be people who are put into positions where they make unethical decisions. That's part of being human, right? Like we're all of us are always being tested in that regard.
Yes.
And some people are just going to fail that test. I think those are failures of society. This is a failure of of the US's white collar crime justice system. If you look at the statistics in the Northern District of California, which is the U.S. Attorney's Office that's responsible for prosecuting white collar crime, I mean, they do almost nothing really when it comes to white collar crime. They're focused on, you know, drugs and things like that, immigration. The vast majority of the U.S. Department of Justice does is immigration and drugs. Everything else is like almost nothing. And if you look at the number of white collar crime prosecutions over the last, 20 or 30 years, I mean, it has just declined. It is the opposite of hockey stick growth. It's just plummeted. So if you don't fund, regulation and the enforcement of laws, then you will have more crime. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So I think we just, these are just decisions that we make as a society. Do we want strong federal agencies and law enforcement? to sort of keep everything in balance. That's we have to decide. I don't know. Some people would say no. I mean, I think if you ask like Republicans, they would say no. Like the free market will solve every problem and let people roam free. I tend to think the evidence does not really support that thesis. But I also think there's a lack of appreciation for. I think we don't as a society also just appreciate that there are different types of people. Like you want people who are willing to bend the rules and drive and stop at nothing to get what they want, because those people actually sometimes accomplish great things, right? And but you also want them to be kept in check, right? Like the point is, like, you want to allow those people to do what they do, but within boundaries, like within certain boundaries. And setting, it's like raising kids. I have like young kids, right? And like, you don't want your kids to be little robots and just do everything, and never question authority and all this stuff. But you also need to set boundaries. And so it's like this kind of delicate balance. I think one of the big problems, honestly, is like this idea. I don't know if it's as big in Europe as it is here, but like of corporate ethics. Like there's this idea that like companies need to like behave ethically. And, I just think that is letting regulators and law enforcement off the hook. Companies don't act ethically. Companies act in the interest of shareholders. And that's actually a good thing. That's the way it should be. But if you don't enforce the laws and you say companies are allowed to just do whatever, they'll regulate themselves. They have, pressure from the public to be ethical and protect the environment and all this stuff. Well, of course, they're just going to do stuff that like looks good, that makes good marketing. And they're really ultimately looking out for shareholders. So I think we have a lot of just naive people who want to believe that everybody can somehow be kept, can be made good by just sort of like pressuring them publicly or something on social media or whatever. And that's just not how it is. That's not humanity. Some people are rule followers and do everything. They have a moral compass and they follow that moral compass. And some people don't. Some people care about right. Some people are psychopaths, and some people care about only money, and getting ahead in their careers. And that's just, you just have to, I think we just need to accept that as a
and
people.
Design around that as well.
Design around it. Exactly. Which we have. I think we've gotten away from it. Maybe that ethics is a muscle is a really good point, right? Like we have to think about all this stuff as a muscle that needs to be exercised.
Yeah. But the point with designing, like, for example, in terms of AI, right? Like you have this AI ethics acts in Europe, and like in US, there was something in Congress recently, right? Like I don't know if there was anything signed, or it was just discussions. But there is this fear that those regulations are actually serving the big guys because they can afford to, pay the lawyers to build and use maximum power they have within the legal like power, while the small guys are not going to even try because they cannot afford that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair argument. Many people have made that argument, and that is what tends to happen with regulation. I'm not ultimately that worried. I think, like I said before, I think that there will be a lot of disruption, and these rules about, like AI, it's like these executive orders. I mean, these are not like hard and fast laws. I think that ultimately, that they're not going to get in the way of innovation. But I do. I mean, I think that, there, like I said before, there are existing laws that can be used to enforce pretty much any bad outcome that comes from this AI. So I think if companies feel like, if we do something bad, like we're going to be held liable, potentially, civilly, but potentially even criminally liable if we like really do something bad, like that is actually going to keep them in line much more than like, well, you should really think about safety and come talk to us before you spend $100 trillion on training your model, which they're going to do anyway. You know, they're going to go talk to government anyway. I just think that's what, like, we misunderstand what people are afraid of. People are afraid of going to jail. Like, honestly, like, I think that's, you know, that's a motivate. Like, if you're like worried you might go to jail, then you're going to think twice about like doing something horrible.
True. But I don't know, in this moment, in this type of technology, I think sometimes it's hard to predict the outcome and the consequences of spreading, I don't know, misinformation, and then just worrying about consequences.
Well, misinformation is not actually a crime. You know, there's not actually anything against the law about spreading misinformation, at least not in this country, you know. You can do that. I mean, I don't know. I think the misinformation thing is kind of overblown too. I mean, it, like, ultimately, you know, if there's just certain people who want to believe that, you know, whatever, Hillary Clinton is running a child molestation ring out of a pizza parlor, you know, and like those people, they were not going to vote for, you know, they didn't like switch their vote based on that. Right. Like they, you know, they want to believe this crazy stuff. And like, I think there's always a certain population that will just believe whatever their tribe says. And, you know, I ultimately think that's not a good thing. And I wish that were not the case. But when we actually get together and we say, you know what, we really need to make sure that, like, gosh, we gotta protect people here from all this bad information, you know, it's a slippery slope. And where does it end? Right. Like, I think ultimately it always ends, you always end up crossing the line and then backing it. Right. Like, we did cross the line, I think, during the pandemic, during the last election, like, you know, the Biden laptop thing, like censoring all the COVID, you know, skepticism around the vaccine and all this stuff. Ultimately, that had the opposite of the intended effect, right? Like all like trying to stop the COVID misinformation, I think only emboldened the people who were against the vaccine.
Exactly.
Because then they could say, oh, well, now there's this like conspiracy to keep the information. You know, I think the way you win is like you say the true information. You go out and you tell the truth, and you try to make a better, more convincing argument and get people onto your side. Like that's how you win. You don't win by silencing people who are spreading misinfo and disinfo. It just it's a losing battle. And ultimately AI just, it makes it a little bit easier to do that stuff, but it doesn't actually change the game that much. I mean, people still have to spread that through social media, through those channels. And that's ultimately the trick, right? It's getting those algorithms to get your misinfo and disinfo to the right people at the right time. So that's my view on all that stuff.
Sorry, you are right. But then I guess ultimately the person who has more money to fund this type of information wins, right? Like it is about how much and whom does this information reach? And there are so many people undecided in even in terms of voting. So you would want them to see the both sides. And right now with any social media, maybe I don't know about X right now, Twitter, but it's like we are in a bubble, right? Like we just kept being fed the same thing, which already confirms our bias.
Yeah. I mean, I think, sure, all that's true. I just think in the end, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you might have more money and you could spend that money on. There's probably just as much money on both sides of these things, right? I think ultimately it's just making that convincing argument and trying and trying to get people onto your side. I mean, that's ultimately the best way to go about this stuff. I honestly, I think it's like, I mean, look at X, the whole thing, a lot of that, what's going on with X is like, that is a direct reaction to, I think, that company going totally overboard, and the pendulum swing. It started out as like totally free speech, right? Like like Twitter was like, we're not going to police speech at all. And then it like gradually becomes like, well, maybe we need to like stop the terrorists. Well, maybe we need to stop the Nazis. And then you're just like, getting more and more. And pretty soon you have like thousands of people doing nothing but censoring people on your platform. And of course it's going to go overboard. And, they're kicking off like all these conservatives or anybody who questions the COVID vaccine and all this stuff. They created like an army that eventually just like took over. And now it's gone completely off the deep end in the other direction. And, I don't know, like, is that the result that people wanted? Like, I think we should just think about like, what is the result that you want? Like, what is ultimately the result that you want to get to? Yeah. And like, what's the best way to get there? I don't think like creating some gigantic censorship apparatus is going to get people to the result that they want to get to.
No, because there is no discussion there, right? Like, it's just all siloed.
Yeah. And it just creates a backlash. I mean, you don't win. You can't win. You're never going to silence people into like, submission. It never works. Even if you're really well-meaning and even if you're right, which I happen to think those people are. Like, I was not a vaccine. Like, I was encouraging people. I got the vaccine, like I'm not. Yeah. But I wish that the disinformation, misinformation did not exist, but it does. And it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah. But then how can we help people like get to the truth, get to the source?
People are not as dumb as everybody thinks. Like, I think a lot of times when people are, saying this stuff, they're not like saying they believe in these conspiracy theories or whatever. I think a lot of times they're lashing out. Like, it's not like, ultimately when people sit down and they're level-headed and they're not angry and they're not, and they just sit down and they're like, I would like to make a, real effort to figure out what the truth is. They ultimately know pretty much where they should go. Like, you go to trusted sources, right? Like mainstreams. You don't go to like some random websites and like seek out crazy. I mean, sure, maybe you could cherry pick and find some examples of where that might have happened. But for the most part, I think people realize like there are trusted sources to go to, and like probably aren't aliens, landing on Earth and like whatever the QAnon thing is, right? Like the lizard people have taken over. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, I just don't. It's to me, it's like laughable, and like taking it super seriously, and like we need to stop people from believing in the lizard people. It just makes you sound, you're just lowering yourself to like that level in a sense,
Of course, but it makes for a good story, right? And clickbaits.
When I was a kid, before, like when people, I grew up in a time when people still went to the grocery store, and you would like stand in line to buy your groceries, and you did that often because there was no delivery, there was no Instacart, right? So you were in the grocery store all the time, and every time I went to the grocery store, there were magazines, right? And there was always some magazine with a crazy UFO, conspiracy theories, right? Yeah. And like, I don't know, we didn't freak out and say like, however many millions of people who stand in line in the grocery store twice a week are being exposed to these conspiracy theories. Like, we didn't freak out. It was just like, we laughed about it. Like, oh, haha, like the National
but
Enquirer.
Maybe there were too many of them. So in the end, like, you become immune, like you just ignore it.
Well, maybe that is what will happen here, right? Like maybe as AI makes disinformation, misinformation just more and more prevalent, maybe people will just tune it out, right? So maybe it's a good thing. Maybe you're right.
Tricky. Okay, but since you cover so much on this, what kind of tech or what kind of tools do you see which are really cool in maybe curating news, or apart from obviously your newsletter? But
yeah, we're using AI. We're actually we have this thing called Signals, where we sort of survey the landscape and find the best articles to kind of highlight and give readers just a sense of like, here's how the world is looking at this top story today. And we're actually using AI to go out and find those sources, but not just to find them, but also like translate things from other languages. So here's what the papers in Russia are saying today about like Navalny, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a good use of that tool. I don't think it will replace writing or journalists really. Like it's not good enough to do that. And I think people who do that are totally misguided, but I think I think it can be a really powerful tool, and we haven't even really begun to scratch the surface yet on using it. I think bigger companies are starting to figure out how to use it. Like they're basically, the main way is like RAG, like retrieval augmented generation. So these companies that have unstructured data that they've never really been able to make use of are now seeing if they can take AI models and turn that into valuable information. And there's starting to be like a whole cottage industry just around the data aspect of that, like figuring out how to move data, or not even move data, but process data, and then move that process metadata to the cloud to be analyzed by the AI models. I mean, we're not high budget enough to like have something crazy like that right now, but ultimately I think we should. And I think news organizations have a ton of unstructured data that is very, very valuable. I mean, if you think about just like all the notes and everything, I mean, clearly there are issues there around protecting your sources and all this stuff, but I mean, it's figuring out how to tap into that power is, I think really could supercharge media organizations, and that's what we need. I mean, there's how many newspapers are going out of business every day? It's just it's a bloodbath, and I think figuring out how to more efficiently cover the news in like a real quality way, not just like clickbait or sort of repeating stuff, is valuable.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's how I view it. How do you view it?
No. I you are the expert here. I can only I'm working on AI in terms of public and private sector, but like more on like customer service and decision intelligence. But do you think is it going to be like a hybrid for those media companies to monetize?
I think that you would be. I think if you start selling the data somehow, or becoming like a data broker, I think that would be sort of bad for a media organization's reputation. Even if it wasn't unethical, even if it was sort of, you got people to agree to the terms of service or whatever, I think it just then it turns you into something else. I think it's bad enough that the media websites use all these trackers and everything, and at the same time they're writing about how bad that is, that's happening. But I think but I was thinking more like just in the news gathering / production side, it would be really good. I mean, I'm not an expert. Like, I'm not on the business side of I've never been on the business side of a news organization. So I've had maybe like a closer look at it, just being at the information and now Semafor, because you get at a startup, you get to see more of how that works. But I think, to me, like if you can charge subscriptions, that's like ultimately like the best thing, because that's the most pure form of journalism. But then I think you run into some issues around just impact, right? Because how many people can read it and get behind the paywall. But I think that we're doing something interesting, which around like quite, premium non-programmatic advertising. So it's like much more, I think, to me, what I like about it is like, it reminds me more of the old, the original like model of newspapers, which is you have advertisers who agree to buy a certain number of ads in your publication over a certain amount of time. And they don't get to decide which article it goes next to, or, exactly which readers' eyeballs get on it. And like, it's more like, I'm going to get this general audience, which I think is a really good audience for me to read. And as long as they have a certain circulation over, a certain time, I know I'm going to generally reach those people. And then that, I think, is the best of both worlds, because it gives you that good advertising revenue, but you're not incentivized you're not getting paid per click, right? Which I think just creates that downward spiral that we've seen in the news industry, that, it just ultimately doesn't pan out. The traffic pay per click model, it's just like, I think it's just not a good way to fund journalism.
Of course it's not. It's in the end it becomes very biased. But since everything is right now digital, I don't see it coming, like going back to the old model. I don't know. It just
maybe not. And by the way, this is just my personal opinion. I mean, I'm not like, this is not the opinion of any publication I work for or have worked for. It's just my view. But I mean, I think what I'm saying is, like, it's not going to go back to the old way, but I think there may be ways to find happy mediums, to the old ways. I think we're doing events and things like that too, which bring in revenue. And I think, you find the revenue where I think when you're running a company, like, you have to figure out where to get the revenue and to stay afloat and all this stuff. So it's a tough job. I mean, this is not like, you're not in an industry where, you're going to see 1000x growth, right? You're creating a product that does, take resources to build and create. And, that's part of it, but that's part of the joy too, it's a valuable business.
But have you ever considered going into like tech company instead of being in media, but covering for tech?
Oh, like working in technology.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think I'm probably like too old for that now, but I think, like, I do admire that. I mean, I think, to do, I think it'd be really fun to do a startup or something, but I also think I've read enough and talked to enough founders that I know it is just one of the hardest things.
It is. That is very rewarding if it works out, and you have to get to. You have to find the product market fit. You have to understand the problem, and that's exactly what you did with your book and with lots of other projects. So.
A book is kind of like a startup.
Foundations. It's true. Yes, it is. You have to fight for funding. You have to fight for audience. There is lots of things which are very, very, we have in common. So
I think CEO. I really have a lot of respect for like startup CEOs. It's just it is just a painful, endurance sport that that I think it's fun. It's fun. It's probably more fun to write about than actually do. I would say.
Which startups or which industries do you particularly like or follow?
Like within tech or
within tech.
I don't know. Lately, I've really kind of been. I've had a lot of fun talking to people who are in the biotech space. It's not like my main area, but I love this idea of being able to use AI to manipulate biology to like digitize that.
Are you also into longevity?
Well, I guess that's part of. I guess that's longevity is kind of like part of that. Like I've interviewed the In Silico CEO, and they're doing that stuff. But like really, they're talking about longevity through, curing diseases, right? Like I think I think it's really exciting if we get to a place where you can actually like instead of when you go to the doctor, instead of like trying to figure out what's wrong with you, they just like look at every piece of DNA that's in your body, and they can see like all the bacteria that you have and every virus, that's swimming around, every cancer cell, and just be like, okay, like here's where the problem is. We're going to create a custom made drug for you that just does exactly what it needs to do. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like the promise of where we're headed. Obviously that's science fiction right now, and I don't think that's happening anytime soon. We've
seen so many of it in the movies, right? Already.
I mean, I think it's going to happen at some point, maybe not in our lifetime, but like, I just think that area is really exciting. And, I sort of actually wonder if autonomous cars at some point are going to happen. I think there needs to be another breakthrough, but I see things like the thing I mentioned earlier with VJEPA that Meta's doing. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what if you take that method and you follow it to its conclusion? You're like, okay, well, what you have is like computer vision that's just a lot smarter, and probably takes less compute power to look at the world. And, maybe that's actually the route to autonomous driving. I live in San Francisco. I mean, I live in the Bay Area. I'm in San Francisco a lot. Have you seen these Waymo cars driving around with no driver?
I saw the videos, but I haven't seen in person, no.
The Waymo, there's Cruise. Maybe I should be, but no, I'm not really. But Cruise was driving around too. Now they're off the road because they had some issues. But there was a time where it was Cruise and Waymo, and you could end up at night. Usually there are more of them at night, so you'd end up sometimes in like a neighborhood, and every other car just seemed to be a driverless car with no one in it. And I still just like every time I see one, I'm just like, I cannot believe that we're here yet. Like I thought it would take so much longer, and I know it's a bit of there's a parlor trick aspect to it because they've done so much human painstaking, bespoke labor to get it to work in this geographic area. So like, it's not scaling yet. You can't just like tell the car to go to any city and drive, but it's still amazing. And I think that is like, to me, still one of the great challenges so many people die there's like 1 million people a year or something around the world who die in car accidents every year. Like that's just, but I think we've like forgotten about it because of all this AI stuff. But I think it's because of all the large language model stuff. But
you have the waves of hype, right? Like, what was before AI? Was it VR?
Crypto?
No. Crypto. Crypto.
Well, now we're back to VR, right? We're back. Ask me, are you gonna get one of those headsets? The Apple.
From what I was reading, and I obviously watched the Mark's video slashing Apple. I'm thinking I will check them both. Are you?
No, but when I read all the stories about people returning them, I was like, oh, I should have done that. I should have bought one. So I got it on day one, and then I could like blog about it and write about it and then return it 2 weeks later. Why didn't I think of that? Because they didn't give me a review unit. But I have the vision, this thing. I have this one, a review unit of the Quest 3. It's really cool. I've actually been a huge fan of VR since day one. I remember when Facebook acquired Oculus. I had like one of the first things, the cool things I did when I moved to San Francisco is I was at a party and they had like an Oculus. This was before Facebook acquired it, and like just like walking around fighting zombies, and like this is so cool. But ultimately, like I think Mark Zuckerberg was right. It's much more of like a fun thing to do rather than like a work tool. Like I don't think I think sitting looking at a computer screen is bad enough. Putting a head on, helmet on your face, looking at the screen is like just going to get really old really fast.
Yeah. You cannot escape. I don't know. You cannot escape. I don't buy into this for work purposes. Yeah, for gaming, sure, but.
A lightweight pair of glasses that looks exactly like regular glasses that you can have a screen in or transpose things in the real world. That would be awesome, I think. But I think it
is coming.
But I don't know. I mean, right now, the physics that needed, right? The understand, like the breakthroughs have not happened yet. So who knows? Like it's impossible to predict if and when that will ever arrive.
I heard lots of new development is happening in Japan, Taiwan, obviously for semiconductors. So we may hear of some new companies soon from there.
Okay, so, I believe you.
That will be tricky. I might know someone. Okay.
Let me know.
So
let me know.
VR. When I can, I will let you know. Okay, so VR. Anything else you are excited about? What you've been writing about? And
I still
think you want to try.
I still think blockchain is interesting. Yes. I think we're seeing that sort of quietly under the radar happen now. Not crypto, but like in the way that it sort of was originally meant to happen. I think it's still, to me, it's still a great concept. This decentralized way of keeping track of everything, where no one has like that power, and it's lower. It's much lower cost. You can do things much faster. I think it's kind of starting to catch on. I'm interested to see what happens. I don't care at all about like who's gonna, like what the price of Bitcoin is, and who's gonna get rich off of the latest NFT and all that stuff. I care about the fundamental underlying technology and what that means for the future of the web and the internet. And there's some interesting tie-ins with AI as well, where there's this idea, this concept that you could like run and train AI models on distributed compute across the world. I mean, it's an old concept, but there are people trying to do like the really hard technical work to make that possible. And I think that's really kind of cool too.
It is. And if you think of it, of that, lots of things which some people find revolutionary at this point, like AI, has been around since 60s, right? And it just took time for people to catch up, to gain momentum. And I guess enough scientists, enough of actually different type of people to showcase the true potential.
Yeah. I mean, we're now in a Cold War again, with China, and it's driven by technology. So, I mean, if you look at like all these advances, right, like the internet, all this stuff, it came out of the Cold War, and it's unfortunate actually that war is like the biggest driver of human innovation. But I mean, I hopefully we look at it as the prevention of war, right? But that's, to me, I mean, I think just seeing more and more tax dollars go into basic research is really exciting, because that's where I think the real gains are, the real innovation happens, and at least the breakthroughs. And I think not knocking capitalism and our whole system we have here. I think venture capitalists and startup founders play a very crucial role as well. But like, I think the public investment has been like lacking in recent years. So I think getting that, up is just, the ROI on that is going to be great for the economy and humanity.
Yeah. So how can we be more vocal that it's needed? Like some random John Smith. How can we tell the government?
I think I don't know. I mean, I think to me, I think we in the media at least. Well, that's not your question. It's like, how does the average Joe? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Write your local congressman or whatever your country you're in. Write your local but I think the word is getting out. I think the narrative around that has changed. I think people like Mariana Mazzucato, who's written about this for years now, for like a decade, she has done a lot to kind of like change the narrative. And I think you're even hearing that in Silicon Valley. Like the story today I did, and which I know you haven't read yet, but like I interviewed researchers who, about like how AI research is kind of becoming more secretive in Silicon Valley. Because it used to be, before ChatGPT, it was like, let's publish all our research, and now it's like, oh, well, actually it's too valuable to publish. And, but a lot of the researchers I talked to said, yeah, we need government. Like we need academia, which is government funding. Essentially, we need academia to have more resources, more compute resources, so that we need that competition. It's important. So I think that to me tells me that I think the narrative is different than it was. I remember, I think before, when I got out here, I got out to cover tech in the end of 2013. I think I think the narrative was like, what do we need government for? Like this, the private sector does all the innovation now. Government is completely useless. They're slow, and look at the website for the healthcare thing. It's terrible and all this stuff. And it's like, well, actually that's not, that I think talking about that, you're ignoring the basic research stuff. I mean, you could, people still say a lot of bad things about government and all that stuff, but I think they at least now are saying, actually, like, we need that funding for basic research. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's encouraging.
And yes, that's promising. Okay. And last question, since, the elections are coming and it's being called, I know it's tricky subject, but there are so many elections happening all over the world. How do you see it playing out? With the whole AI and what we discussed already a little bit, deep fakes.
Well,
and some governments not playing the role of actually showing the truth.
Surprise, surprise. I can't believe politicians don't tell the truth. No, I think that, I mean, AI will play a role, but I think everybody wants AI to play a bigger role than it actually is going to play. Everybody wants AI. It wants it to be the AI election. I mean, I think it's terrible. We should focus on the ideas, the ideas around the election. I hear so much of election coverage is like, it's just the personalities of the politicians and who wore what, who made what gaffe, who's too old, who's too young, or whatever. And then it's like, and now we have this whole AI thing. Well, the AI is going to like ruin the election. It's like, can we just talk about like, what are the actual ideas? Like, I wish we could just get to the substance of it, because I don't know. I think a lot of this stuff is just a distraction, and people freak out when the wrong person is elected and stuff, instead of thinking about, well, why was the wrong person elected? Like what happened here? I mean, you can make AI the scapegoat, but really, like, do you really think that that's the problem? I mean, I think people are feeling, for whatever reason, they're feeling fed up and like willing to like blow up their, not literally blow up, but just like see their institutions destroyed because they're fed up with society. Like that should be like that is not AI's fault. I think there's something else going on there. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But maybe in countries like in Europe, there are some what is it? Taiwan, India, Russia, and you guys. So while in the US it may be such narrative, but Russia may not be so lucky with getting enough information.
Well, Russia is a totally different story, obviously, especially with today's terrible news.
And you don't know if it's true or not.
True.
It's not,
You don't know whether anything's true. I know. Well, hopefully, I mean, that's the thing. Like, that is like, some people in the US are like, okay with, well, yeah, like maybe we should go that route too.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just crazy. Like, what people don't appreciate what they have, until it's gone. And I think,
yes,
I mean, we should appreciate what we have here, and we should want to hold on to it. I mean, no matter what party you're in, no matter what your, personal situation is, and looking over there, it's a great example. Instead, we have people like Tucker Carlson going over there and trying to say, I don't know what that guy's talking about, these days, but to me, it's just that this is not a technology problem, though. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like, this is a problem that goes so much deeper than technology. And if anything, technology is just like making it more apparent. It's shining a light on all these problems, but it's a deeper issue. I don't have the answers.
It's people's issue.
Right.
It's always our fault. It's always people problem. Okay, I guess we are running a bit on time, so I want to also ask you about this really cool project. You I don't know if you're still running those the video series called The Olympics. How hard can it be? So you tried hockey with figure skating. You tried to learn this?
That was okay. So that was that was when I'm not doing that anymore. It was really fun. I was covering sports again. And it was I was covering the Vancouver Olympics, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I got to just go try these Olympic sports? And what if I could find Olympic athletes, who had won medals in the Olympics, and get them to like give me a lesson in their sport? And so I came up with this title, The Olympics, how hard can it be? Cool. And I did, speed skating, figure skating, moguls, the luge, ice hockey, biathlon. Oh. I don't know if I did anything else, but the luge was terrifying. That was this guy named Gordy Shear, who had won a silver medal in the luge. He just pushed me down and was like, "Don't try to steer." And I'm shooting down this luge track. I can't see anything because I'm hitting the wall, and my foot's hitting the wall, and there's snow hitting my eyes. So I'm like basically blind going down the luge track. But I survived. It was okay.
Okay, so you're not doing this anymore? You're not doing it professionally?
You know what? If somebody would pay me to go do that again, I would totally do it. It probably just hurt myself this time, but I'd still do it.
It would be a lot of fun.
It was great. I love the Olympics. I think the Olympics is the best sporting event, and it's really special. So
it is. It is. It shows you what people are capable of in the good way.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
So
this has been fun.
Thank you, Reed, as well. And hopefully see you in Europe soon. And if you need help with finding ways to get this European passport, I can ask around.
Okay, let me know. Let me know if you know someone. All right, thank you. Okay,
thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.